Welcome to the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sue Carrick, and I'm passionate about inspiring, motivating, supporting and informing women over 50 to embrace this exciting time of life. Health and wellness in mind, body and spirit are the foundations for living well, but there is so much more to a life well lived. Each week, through conversations with my guests, I'll be presenting topics that will help us all to live well and enjoy life. So join me as we discover new ways to become women living well after 50. Are you ready to start living? What are you waiting for? Let's get started. This is part one of a two-part episode with my interview with Rachel Lankester of Magnificent Midlife. We're talking about her experience with menopause and her book, Magnificent Midlife, Transform Your Middle Years, Menopause and Beyond. Welcome to another episode of the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm delighted to have you join me, and I can't believe we're into our third episode of season 4. Now, how are you feeling? Are you 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 or beyond? We're all going through transition in life, and that starts at the perimenopause. That's what we're talking about today. Menopause is a hot topic at the moment, and it's great to hear that women are speaking out and talking about their experiences, and there's so much more information and resources around than even when I went through menopause way back when. My guest today is Rachel Lankester, the founder of Magnificent Midlife, an online hub celebrating and empowering women 40 plus. Rachel's the author of Magnificent Midlife, Transform Your Middle Years, Menopause and Beyond, and she's also the host of the Magnificent Midlife podcast. Now, after a shocking early menopause diagnosis at 41, Rachel scratched her own itch and created what she wasn't able to find to help herself. This includes one-on-one or group mentoring, educational resources, and an online membership to help women vibrantly transition through the sometimes messy middle of life. And isn't that what we want? It is a transition. We all go through it as women, and at different stages and in different ways. And I'm sure that you're going to enjoy my discussion with Rachel today. So let's go and join the conversation. Welcome, Rachel. It is lovely to have you join me on the Women Living Well After 50 podcast.
It's lovely to be here, Sue. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, I've known you, we haven't really been in touch, but I've known of you, and we have spoken once quite some years ago now, but I've been wanting to have you come on to the program because menopause is such a hot topic at the moment. And I mean, I'm 65 in 20 sleeps, actually. I think my grandson told me yesterday. So it was a little while ago for me. And even then, there wasn't that much information around. And I've just finished your book, and I thought, where was Rachel Lankester when I was going through menopause?
Thank you.
So what I wanted to do today is, I know that I want to say that I've read the book. I loved it. I read it in a day. I couldn't put it down. And what we will talk about it throughout the interview. But what I wanted to say was that I loved it because I've tried to read other books on the topic, and sometimes they just get a bit too technical, or it's more of a resource. And whilst your book is a resource, really, it's like a Bible. But what I loved about it was I could hear your voice throughout, and it made it much easier to understand, to to really connect. And so I would encourage everyone, women out there, even if you are postmenopause like I am, there is still so much information in that book that is helpful at whatever stage you're at. So now I'm going to hand over to you, and I'd like you to share with the listeners your story and what has brought you to this point now of writing the book.
Well, Sue, I'm a bit teary-eyed, actually. I'm
Oh,
going to mop my eyes up here because that response is exactly what I am hoping for, was hoping for with the book, that it would connect to people, that it would touch people, and that it would create something for them for the next magnificent stage of their life. And you're right, that the third section of the book, so the first two sections, one is about unpicking all the negative narratives about aging and menopause. Two is menopause, but three is about creating magnificent midlife and beyond. So yes, it's relevant to all women. So why did I do this? I was given an early menopause diagnosis at 41. And I'm 56 now. So I'm a long time through menopause as well. And I'm still talking about menopause because on the one hand, we need to raise awareness of it. But on the other, I want to counter some of the real negativity about menopause, which I see, especially where I am here in the UK. But I know it's spreading. I sense that this negativity is spreading, and I really want to sort of put a stop to that. So it was a devastating diagnosis at the time. I was trying for another child, and my initial reaction to it was made so much worse because of my own internalized ageism towards myself. I came out of that doctor's office and I felt like a dried up old prune at 41. How ridiculous was that? And nobody had told me that. Nobody had said those specific words to me. But we are so youth obsessed in some of our cultures, including yours, I think, that we don't know what our role is supposed to be as an older woman. Our world doesn't have a place for us. What are we supposed to do when we cross from being a fertile woman to being an infertile woman? And so eventually I realized this. I realized that I was, saying ridiculous things to myself. It didn't make me any less of a vibrant, magnificent, sexy woman than I was before I got this diagnosis. And as I started learning about ageism and internalized ageism and gendered ageism and the impact that has on our menopause experience and our midlife transition, the more I wanted to communicate that, because I try in the book, I say, let's take inspiration from other cultures. For example, East Asian cultures, where a woman's status increases the older she gets. It increases as she goes through menopause because she's somebody else to be celebrated. And that's what I wanted to put into the book and why I wanted to write it. And so yeah, that's why I wrote the book. And I was so frustrated at the books I was reading. There were lots of books about menopause. Well, there weren't lots. There were some books about menopause, but as you say, they were highly technical and just about menopause. There were books about ageism, and there were books about aging well, how to age well. But what I wanted to do was write a book that would cover all of those, and that, as you say, would be this sort of midlife manual. So there's a bit of menopause, there's quite a lot of ageism, and there's an awful lot of how to age well, how to transition through menopause well, and how to age well. So it's all of that. That's what I wanted to do.
Mm. And with the book, what I liked about it is that you have a quote at the beginning of each chapter, but at the end of a chapter or topic, we have you have some questions. So we can use it as a working tool as well to make us just stop and review what you've written and how that applies to us in our life. And I liked that concept with the book as well.
I think it's so easy. I do it all the time. We read books, we think, oh, they're really great, but we don't embed what we've learned from the books. And I wanted the questions just to be a pause, I suppose, to say, what do you think about what I've written? What are your personal thoughts on this? How might you be able to change the way you think? And I am challenging people to think differently. That's really what I want to do. I want to
Yes.
challenge the status quo.
And I've written down here messaging matters, because you've already talked about certain things with ageism and anti-aging, and all the different messages that we get relating to aging or to menopause. It really matters, doesn't it, how we even talk about it ourselves, as well as how the community as a whole, what terms they use, the message that they're giving out.
It's so important because we talk in negative language. We talk about, my early menopause diagnosis was premature ovarian insufficiency or something like that. We're insufficient, and we talk about, oh goodness me, I can't bear it. Over here in the UK, we've gone back to the 1966 narrative from the book Feminine Forever that menopause is a hormone deficiency. It's not a deficiency. We're supposed to go through menopause. We're supposed to have a different hormonal profile in the second half of our lives, in the same way that we had a different hormonal profile before we went through puberty, And yet now people are talking about it being a deficiency because they want to promote HRT as a way to fix it. So what I'm also saying is to people, be curious about what they're hearing, be curious about who's saying and what they're saying, and what might their ulterior motive be. What is their agenda? And does their agenda suit you? Because we can assume that what we hear is true. And work I've done since the book, actually, I've been researching into the data that's put out, to convince women that menopause is this terrible thing. And some of the data is wrong. I've actually done research and I found that it is wrong. So we need to really question everything. And going back to the other cultures and indigenous societies, they have a completely different experience of menopause. And I believe that is partly linked to how they feel about aging. It's partly diet and lifestyle, but it's also mindset. It's, if we think menopause is going to be terrible, guess what? It's likely to be terrible. We know enough about the brain to know that these messages, it's so, so important. I just wanted to say that I recently started doing videos on TikTok, and I know I'm very old for TikTok, but it's interesting because there are some older people on there. So I just started doing some videos, and the first video I did, I asked people, when did they learn that aging was bad? And I said, maybe you were 20 or 30, or maybe you were really late and it wasn't until you were 40. The responses I got, oh my goodness me, because on TikTok, my video was being shown to younger women. And the youngest response I got was from a woman who said that when she was 5 years old, she watched an advert on telly that told her about a face cream that could knock 5 years off her age. And she imagined herself disappearing completely.
Yeah, see the
At
messaging.
5. At 5. So, and that's what we're drip fed, that messaging, we're drip fed. And why are we drip fed it? Because people want to sell us something. People want to make us believe that we are deficient, that we are faulty, that we have something that needs to be fixed, and then they can sell us something to fix it.
That's so true. I mean, we talking about the face cream, I always have a bit of laugh to myself. You know, they'll be talking about some face cream to get rid of wrinkles, and why would you? I mean, that's our journey of our life, is on our face.
Exactly.
And you know, but they'll have a 20-year-old who's got absolutely gorgeous skin using this product that's aimed for someone at my age group, and it's just, you know, it doesn't work. So, you know, it's been that way. I can remember magazines growing up. If I didn't look this way, if I didn't look that way, it really was so difficult to not to be self-conscious or have a low self-esteem. And that's what's happened. But there are people like you, and hopefully me, that and many other women that are starting to talk about menopause. And I think, for me, I was making notes as I was reading your book, and for me, I wrote down be informed, which is the same as what you're saying with being curious. Be curious and then be informed. Don't just take what one person says and say, well, that's gospel, that's exactly right. Because, as you say, there could be the ulterior motive there, that they're selling a product they want you to buy. And the other thing is, as you say in your book, everybody's different. And we go through, you know, we've got to find our own way. And I believe that having that a positive attitude, and which isn't always easy. Yep, hot flushes, as we call them here. I think they're called hot flashes now, but you know, they're not pleasant, but you know, that's all part of it. And I think you, as you said, you've got some good advice in your book there. And I'm not going to give away all your secrets, because people need to read the book. But I also liked the Tanya Dalton quote, which I didn't write down, but it was all about balance in life.
Yeah. And well, sort of paraphrasing that is my idea and her idea that menopause symptoms aren't actually symptoms of menopause. They're what happens when our hormones change, because we go through menopause and we become far more sensitive. Our bodies can't process things in the same way as they used to be able to. And that's why and I think Tanya sees this as well, I see menopause as this gift, because it is a chance in midlife for us to go, okay, what's not working? Now, we can take synthesized hormones, and I did for a time, because I was on, because of the early menopause diagnosis. So we can take that and we can get back to how we felt before. But actually, we're supposed to be feeling different. We're supposed to transition. We're supposed to go somewhere else. And if we take the synthetic hormones and we don't deal with the underlying issues, then those are going to continue to be problems going forward. So, for example, and I found, I kind of knew this, but I had the proof when I came off HRT at 51, because I immediately had a hot flush when I had alcohol and when I had sugar in the form of chocolate. So when we have these hot flushes, what I want women to think about is it's not just because of the hormones. It's because there's a trigger. And the trigger could be caffeine. It could be alcohol. It could be sugar. It could be stress. And this is the one we forget about. The impact of stress on our modern experience of menopause is massive. It could be that we're overweight. And nobody wants to talk about weight in the context of menopause. They just don't want to hear it. It could be that we're not doing enough exercise. Exercise has been proven to improve menopause symptoms, especially hot flushes. But the stress element, I think, is huge. You know, they've found that cognitive behavioral therapy can reduce both the number and intensity of hot flushes. And it mainly works by taking away the shame, because we feel shame when this happens to us, because we feel shame about menopause, because we've been taught to feel shame about menopause by the marketing people that want to sell us the products to fix us. So when you start unpicking all of this, which is what I tried to do in the book, the dots start to connect,
Mm.
and you see the bigger picture, and you see what's going on. And now I am just super suspicious of people. I want to know, okay, why are you telling me that? And where's your source? And where did that information come from? And is it true?
Mm.
Or is it true in your version of the universe? And it's not true in mine,
Mm.
and I don't want that. So there is so much going on. But I think if we can take menopause as an opportunity to start listening to our bodies. I didn't listen to my body. I just carried on. I was the Duracell bunny. I was going. I had lived a very stressful life. I'd been through a divorce, I'd moved continents, I worked in financial communication, so it was all stock exchange driven. It was super high powered. I'd lived in New York, I'd gone through 9/11, I'd moved continents again, I was a single mother. I had lived a very stressful life. And it was uncanny because it happened at the time when I had fallen in love with a new man and I was very happy. But that is also a stress on the body. Even, great happiness is a change. It's stress. It's not, sitting in a corner being zen. And, it's like there's a lot of excitement going on. And so I think we need to start thinking about what's going on and start listening. Aches and pains. Why are we getting aches and pains? Maybe we're not moving enough. In our modern society, we sit down far too much. We don't get up and move around. When I get an ache or a pain, I think, okay, I haven't done my yoga. I need to do my yoga. And I know a lot of women don't want to do yoga. I fought yoga until I think I was 39. I eventually thought, okay, do some yoga. And a lot of women don't want to do it. But guess what? It works. So
Well, I was reading about that with the exercise, and it's really about lifestyle, and it's probably when you're getting those symptoms or when things are happening to your body, it's a good time to really step back and just take time out to see what the triggers are, as you say, or where you're at in your life and in all areas. Now, in the book, you go through an audit, but even just looking at your health, and it's a good opportunity to make those changes for a healthier lifestyle. That's reducing stress, it's exercising, it's moving. And a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to exercise. I mean, I found running at 50 because I was working with some young girls who thought that I was one of them. They booked me into boot camp, and then we started running, and I've never run in my life. And then I went on to run half marathons, and I've run marathons in my 60s. Now, that's not for everyone, but I think it did help me because there's so many benefits from moving. So you find something to move, but also looking at the food that you're eating as well, and the inflammation that some of the processed foods cause and things like that, alcohol, all of that, and the mindset. So really, it's a great opportunity, as you said earlier, about having the right attitude towards it all to make these great changes. So you'll be feeling fantastic inside and outside as well.
I really do. I mean, my attitude towards menopause has changed so much. And you might think, having gone through early menopause and having had that devastation and not being able to have the second child that I wanted, that I'd have a negative view of it. But I don't. I really, the more I learn about it, the more I appreciate it. I like to say that the end of my fertility has become the most fertile time of my life. I do things now that I never would have done before. I host my own podcast. I've written a book. I'm a blogger. I come as a guest on a podcast like this. There's so many things. And I love who I am now. I mean, that's I think the really exciting thing. And I believe that we are going through a process. We evolve as we go through life, and we have this idea that we get to midlife and that's the peak, and then we go down. Or maybe we get the peak at 25. That was another question I asked on TikTok. When do you think you're in your prime? And people were saying 25, 30. And I thought, well, if you're in your prime at 30 and I'm now 56 and I'm hopefully going to live until I'm 96, that's another 40 years. Do we really live life thinking we've reached our prime in less than the first third of our lives? That's just bonkers, isn't it? Doesn't make sense, doesn't stack up.
No. And I was interviewed for a national magazine out in Australia and New Zealand on, it was basically, they found me through running and the blog and the podcast. But the question was, are you happier now than when you were in your 20s? And I am. I wouldn't go back to being in my 20s or 30s. I'm happy. And in fact, I felt great when I turned 50 and I was in my 50s, but now I'm in my 60s and I think I feel even better. So it's not the end. It's a brand new experience that we can all look forward to. And that's not downplaying, though, women that do, have they suffer or they have things that are making them not feel well, and they don't feel good going through their menopausal symptoms. But I think that it comes back to the age, and you had another added quote from Viktor Frankl about everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way, and there are always choices to make. And I thought that really stuck out to me, because I thought it's true. We all have our down days, and it's easy to say, oh, you've got to be positive and that sort of thing, but it is our choice, isn't it, when it comes down to it, how we deal with life in general.
It is, I think, and I think there's a narrative around menopause that we're victims of it, that it happens to us and it's something dreadful. And it may be, I agree, it may be difficult. It can be very difficult. I'm not in any way downplaying it, and I'm not being Pollyanna about things. But as you say, we always have a choice. And Viktor Frankl was a concentration camp survivor. So if he can look on the bright side, if he can choose to see things in a different way, then I think we all can. And I think COVID actually has changed the way we view things, because everything shifted there and priority shifted. And I think people have now got a bit clearer on their priorities. And it's such a waste of our lives to think our lives are over in midlife. It's such a waste of our energy to think we are less, and that our bodies have taken over. What I want women to feel from reading my book is that we can take back control. We can be proactive, not just reactive about menopause. So going back to the curiosity, it's, why is this happening? What am I doing that's causing this? So my early menopause diagnosis, no doubt, it was partly because of my early menopause. There's also research that air pollution can lead to early menopause. And I've always lived in the most highly polluted places, always. So maybe that had something to do with it. So I'm curious. And then I'm thinking, okay, what about the toxins I'm putting into my own personal environment, my skincare? So I've tried to go as organic as possible. Not always, but I try. Or I think about it. If I don't feel good, I think about what's my overall toxic load. My cleaning products, my personal products. And so many of us, we just buy all these products and air fresheners and things like that. They're really toxic. And if you live in a place that's already highly polluted, going on off on a bit of a tangent here, but if you live somewhere that's really polluted, then your toxic load will be higher. Whereas if you live in the middle of the countryside and it's lovely fresh air and you've got a high personal toxic load, that may not have such an impact on you. But there's just so much to consider and think about. And that's why I just want women to be curious and not to just be reactive to menopause, but actually be proactive about what's happening and how we can change our experience.
And be open-minded to be trying different things, and also that what works for one person might not work for you as well. So it's a personal journey, really. Now, I do want to talk about, I was waiting for it to come in the book and it came, so I was really happy about that. And that's you have a part about partner involvement, and also where you have a suggested letter that we write to our partner, because I think it's very important. And I actually heard your podcast where you interviewed your husband, and I loved that one. And you know, there's a great connection there, and he's so informed about what you're doing, and not just about this topic, but everything that you do. And I think that perhaps we get to a point in our life where, you know, we're not as open, and especially with menopause. I mean, men probably don't know what to do, how to handle things, and how do they if we don't tell them or inform them? Or it might be, you know, saying it doesn't necessarily have to be man and woman. It can be any relationship. It can be friendship. If you don't open up and say how you're feeling and perhaps what you need, they're not going to know. So I really, I wanted to chat to you about the importance of that partner, I'll say / friends involvement as well.
Yeah, I think we need to feel more comfortable about opening up, because often, you know, women don't want to talk about it, but it goes back to that shame thing again, doesn't it? It's just so ridiculous, because we don't feel shame about puberty and we don't feel shame about childbirth, you know, but we feel this shame about menopause, and that's all associated with the gendered ageism. So I think if we can open up, and I think certainly with male partners, it's really important that we do, because they can't possibly understand. But what is lovely about my husband's involvement and that he's been on this journey is that he actually believes he's got a new woman, and he's very happy with that. You know, he's got, not that he wanted to trade me in, you know, it's not like that, but he's got an evolved version of me. And he's quite happy with that, you know. That excites him. And I think, again, it goes back to that choice, doesn't it? It goes back to the messaging and the narratives. If we can reframe this, you know, that this is the latest iteration of who we were always supposed to be, and that, you know, we're going to be somebody magnificent, even more magnificent than we were, then we can bring that, you know, personal relationship along with us. And it doesn't need to be something scary. It can be something that we share, that we talk about. And that's, so in the book I have the letters, so you can just give the book to your significant other and have them read it, you know. But I think it's about taking away the fear, taking away the shame, taking away the fear. Let's just have an open conversation. And I think with friends as well, I think when women open up, you usually find that other women are experiencing the same thing. It's just that, you know, somebody's got to open up the conversation.
But you do find your support network there. But the other thing that you do take time in the book to write about is the sexual relationships that we have, because our bodies do change. So that doesn't mean, I'm not sure, but perhaps in my parents' generation, and my parents were quite older when they had children, but you probably thought they didn't have sex after a certain point, and perhaps they didn't, who knows. But the thing is that we can still be sexually active and vibrant and I suppose sexually confident, because there's ways around these issues, that can happen when we're, going through that transition.
So I know people think they get very concerned, and vaginal dryness can be a real worry, and it is something that has happened to me, and I kind of think that away with the fact that I never gave birth vaginally. I had a C-section, and therefore my vagina never expanded to accommodate a baby's head. So I can understand that, tightness or dryness might be an issue for me. But there are ways and means around that. And I think it's really important that we don't get too scared, and that, again, we stay curious about what we can learn. So, my personal sexual relationship is different. But as my husband, bless him, says in the podcast, it's different. It's not worse. He actually says it's better. I didn't pay him to say that, but it's different. And there's a lot to explore, and there's a lot, and if you change the narrative, you think, okay, we're on this journey of exploration. What are we going to find out here? And I find that really interesting and really exciting, and not at all. When you take away the shame and the fear and the feeling threatened, and when you think about menopause as a tunnel, not a cave. So during menopause, you may experience some of these things. Post-menopause, everything may be fine. There are many, many women who don't have any problems at all, with their libido, or with dryness, or with tightness, or anything else. So your experience will be your experience, and don't let it become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It goes back to the fear thing. The more you fear it, the worse it's going to be, because you're going to tighten up, you're going to not be relaxed. And what's the biggest sex organ? The brain. And post-menopause, the biggest sex organ is still the brain. And I write about that in the book, and I give resources. There's all sorts of things like, tapping into mindfulness, to get your sense of eroticism back. There's all sorts of things like that to explore. So yeah, I think just take away the fear, don't be frightened, and just be open. And
I think again, it comes back to having that open relationship and being able to discuss that with your partner, and working through it together, really, to find something. So working through it, and you devoted quite a bit of a chapter to this area, and I thought, great, and lots of resources, and so it's all again about being curious, about being open and being informed. So that was good. But having that partner involvement just, I think, helps to make life that little bit easier, and easier for them too. They can understand if you're going off a little bit and that sort of thing. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Rachel. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show and to talk about your book and your life experiences. And I hope that we can possibly have you on again later and talk more, because there is so many topics we could cover. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
Well, it was lovely to chat with Rachel today, and I do hope that you have enjoyed the episode and that you have some takeaway points and maybe learned some things that might help you if you are going through the big M. If you've enjoyed the episode, I'd love you to share it with a friend, because I'm sure there's many women out there who would benefit from listening to Rachel's episode today. And I'd love you to give me a like or a comment just to help the podcast grow. And let's get women living well after 50 growing out there. Well, that's all we have time for today. But in the meantime, and until I see you at the next episode, I want you to remember to live well, enjoy life, and most of all, be a woman living life your way. Bye for now.